Good morning and good afternoon and welcome. It's David Brown from PITS in the UK in London. We've got a good number of attendees joining. So for those who are on time, and I apologise I'm a minute or two late, I will get underway with our a replacement for Oracle Designer webinar. A couple of little bits of housekeeping. You should see that you can enter questions in the GoToMeeting dialog box. So if you've got some questions there, please enter them into the question box. If we don't get round to them today, GoToMeeting does record them if you enter them in the text box, and I'll get back to you with a reply if we know the answer. The slides and the recording will be made available. So before anyone asks, will they be available? Yes, they will be. So thanks for joining. My background with Designer goes back a long, long way. I think we were using a very early version of the forms generator back in, I believe it was 1991, with a character mode version of forms. That was in my Oracle days. Since then, I've done a lot of work with Designer and Forms and various other bits of Oracle technologies. And now I'm working with my colleagues at PITS. PITS, a company purely focused on Oracle technology, which we'll go into as I go through this webinar. So with no further ado, I'm going to get cracking. So, what I'm going to cover, a little bit about the company, not too much. I know you're here to hear a little bit about the alternatives as you move forward with Designer. Then a little bit of a refresher about Oracle Designer for those of you who are using it or thinking of using it or have used it in the past and are looking for a replacement, and a discussion on the possible alternatives. A little bit about PITS first. This is our sort of belief. We strongly believe that the ever-growing complexity of software systems can only be managed by humans if you have software tools that can assist you. What we want to do is control the complexity and engineer higher quality software. So that's our mantra. And following this belief, we're dedicated with all of our passion, knowledge and time to create tools and solutions to help us shape the software needed for tomorrow. So we're very forward-looking, although we're working with a lot of what some people would consider to be older technology. So we're based in Germany in 2 locations. We have this office here in London, in Twickenham, and we have an office serving the USA. Been around for a good number of years, 17 years. Personally, I've only been in the company just coming up to a year or so. Interesting times, lots of interested customers to speak with and prospects. So we're having a great time looking at Oracle technology and looking at where we're going in the future. Reasonable size company, 80 of us around the world, and a large customer base, of which I speak to many of these. Oracle partner, and we do 100% Oracle things. That's not to say we are exclusive to Oracle technology. Occasionally we do get a customer looking to perhaps move to .NET or something like that. If they're moving from Forms or an Oracle technology, some of the stuff we do can help enable that. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. So what do we do? In the center of everything that we have is a repository, and I'm going to go into that a little more detail as we move through. But we enable the full lifecycle development and modernization of Oracle technology. Now, I'm not going to go into much of this at this second. I'm going to go into this further on. Okay. Our focus. Forms, 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 and forms. It says 22 years here, but I was working it out. The number of years I've been working with forms since 1990 is a little longer than that, but perhaps we need to update this slide. But not just looking back, looking forwards. A lot of work we do is with service-oriented architectures, web services, working with Oracle's application development framework. So it's certainly a popular solution moving forward on from Forms, although we get a lot of customers wanting to remain on Forms. and currently quite a few people looking at taking parts of their forms applications and moving them to mobile platform. A few of our customers scattered right around the world, quite a few in the UK, of which I'm looking after with my colleagues, but certainly very much lots in Germany, lots in the US, but scattered right around the world. The last webinar I gave, I think we had something like 32 different countries represented. So forms is still endemic around the world. So let's look at what we're talking about here, and this goes back to why we built Designer at Oracle many, many years ago. And this was to support modeling and to support a methodology to build software. And the whole point of having models, in my mind, is to help us discuss requirements. It's okay coding some analysis or writing pseudocode, but when you go back to end users and ask them, is this what you wanted? Quite often they will say yes, because they don't understand. With a diagram, a visual diagram, perhaps a process model or the data structures that they're going to be using, if you can show them pictures of how you think the system is going to fit together, they might understand it, and even better, they might say, no, that's not what we want. I always find it better to hear a negative, because it means they're actually looking in detail at the system's requirements and the model that you've put together. You can then have that discussion, remodel, understand their requirements, perhaps quickly produce some prototypes, and that's where perhaps some of these systems engineering tools linked with 4GLs came along. Get feedback, document the complete system, and generally improve the quality and maintainability of applications that you're building. Anyone with forms could do a quick master detail, and it looks lovely, and there's lots of code in there that you don't have to touch, don't have to build, and it's very maintainable. But over years, forms applications have lots of bits and pieces bolted on. They need good documentation. And that was the sort of thing that Designer provided. Everything that you were doing, perhaps you could generate out, hence it was stored and recorded in the repository. So methodologies. I'll say my history back at Oracle, very much involved with the case method. There were lots of other methodologies around in those days, SSADM, etc. And lots of case tools to provide them. But these case tools have gradually fallen by the wayside. There was a concept that I saw many projects embody and encourage. Many projects weren't considered to be up and running unless somebody was coding. And this is this whiskey syndrome I'll put on the side there, W-I-S-C-Y. Why isn't somebody coding yet? And a project wasn't seen to have been launched unless somebody had written some code. The whole point about the methodology was do the heavy work first. It's far easier to document and understand a problem before you start writing code than write all the code and then have to go back and fix things. Now, I know prototypes were very popular a few years ago and still are, but one of the worst situations you can do is actually take a prototype and, oh, that's good enough, and you press a button and it goes to production and is launched. I've seen many projects like that, and what happens down the road, you discover that a prototype didn't have documentation, nobody quite knew about impact analysis, dependency analysis, who was going to support it, was there any training material, etc., etc. So a methodology, and these books date back to 92, I believe, was the first one, or thereabouts. They're still very relevant today, and I'm sure many of you, if you've got Designer still in your organizations, will have them on the bookshelf. Don't disregard them. Open them up occasionally. A lot of the methodology can be used today. I know there are other more popular methodologies coming to fruition and other project mantras. You know, people are talking about agile and sprints, etc. Yes, there are ways of running projects, not necessarily fantastic ways of gathering information from end users. So I would still recommend at least having a read of some of these things. And what I'm seeing, which is for me a little bit distressing, and this is a purely personal thing, as we're moving forward, people are writing more and more code, line by line. And for me, every line of code you write is an opportunity for a bug, if you write it manually. If you generate out code, chances are it's going to be perfect first time, rather than missing out an equal signs, a quote, a curly bracket, etc. What I was looking at here, and this is out of Oracle's new JavaScript, and this is a pure data input field, and this is what, here's the code they recommend you to cut and paste, put into your JavaScript, and away you go. I know many people like the flexibility you're getting with JavaScript, but I think it has quite a long way to go, and I think tools will be built to support these sort of environments. It's a personal view, but I know it's very popular, but I think could be a recipe for disaster for very large applications if you've got lots of people writing lines of code line by line by line, or even cutting and pasting huge chunks of code. It's a personal opinion. So that's methodologies. And designer was very tightly coupled with the methodology, and in fact you find in the books the methodologies was very much supported by the designer tool, or case tool as it was originally known as. So the Oracle Designer front screen, for those of you still using it or remember, but I'm going to do a quick poll to start off with here, so bear with me a second if I can just launch this poll. And I want to know what areas of Designer do you use? Are you using the logical modeling, the process modeler, ERD, DFD, function hierarchy diagrammer? Are you using the transformers? Are you doing database modeling? Or are you still doing forms modeling and forms generation and perhaps reverse engineering? So I'll give you a minute or so to give me a little bit of feedback, what you're doing with designers. Well, we've definitely got a lot of people using Designer, which is a good sign. Okay. Right, I think we've got most people have voted there, so thank you very much for that. There's a couple more coming in at the last moment. So I'm going to close that poll. There we go. So that's interesting. We've got 53% of those who voted are still using logical modeling. 53, oh, that can't be right. 53% of, share that. There's the results. I'm hoping you can see the results. Can you see those results? Yeah, good. So, an interesting set of results. Good to see there's a good number of people out there still using Designer. So, taking it from left to right, we had the process modeling, data flow diagrammer, ERD, and function hierarchy diagrammer, very much on that logical modeling, the communication tools, as I always called them, for going back to your end users. Then we had this was really the big game. You weren't just doing modeling for modeling's sake, creating a big lengthy tune, putting it on a shelf, and then building the system. The transformers took a lot of what you did and pushed it into the physical model. For example, an entity relationship diagram, you've got a master detail, or a master that has a many-to-many relationship with another master entity, and the designer database design transformer would actually take that and model that as two master tables and an intersection table. You used to do some really clever stuff there. And similarly with a function hierarchy diagrammer and data usages, entity usages, we'd get a very good first cut via the application design transformer of a module. And that module could then be implemented as a form. So then some tools down the bottom here, dependency manager, matrix diagrammer, administration utility for those who've struggled with creating that repository. a great tool, the repository object navigator, and a whole stack of reports. So that was Designer itself. Once you'd mastered the install, it was quite an intuitive tool to go on and use. So we've got these tools that will take things forward and take things back. So we could actually take a form or a database all the way back to the logical level and model it as a system. So that's Oracle Designer. Okay. So some alternatives. As we're seeing that designers seem to come to an end of life, we're not seeing any more developments. 10G seems to be the end of the road. If you're wanting to generate out forms, you can't generate them out in the latest version of forms. You've got to generate out to 10G and load them into a 12C environment and regenerate them, etc., or use some utilities. So it's very clear that it's not a product that's going forward. However, Oracle has got some excellent tools that can support moving forward. So things like the process modeler, DRD, DFD, FHD, they have some, I say, equivalents in the UML modeling environment. Yes, they are different paradigms, and you do have to learn some new technology, some new practices and methods. So within JDeveloper we have, excuse me, activity modeling, class diagramming for the data size, sequence diagramming, use case diagramming, much more modern way of looking at applications development. On the designer side, we have those transformers I spoke about just now. And in JDeveloper, there are a good collection of transformers as well to take the work you do within the analysis level down to the physical level. So very similar concepts. And in fact, I think they've been enhanced quite a lot from what we had with Designer. Excuse me. You've also got the opportunity to use Oracle's business process execution language as a modeling tool as well. This is much closer to a physical modeling of the applications. It's a tool, if you're doing a lot of integration work, it's certainly worth considering because you can model the integrations between various elements. The work I've done with that tool was fairly classic, a classic development where we were looking at reading in data files from one system, doing a bit of integration, manipulation, and then pushing out the other end and loading into another system. So BIPL is very good at not only documenting, understanding your integration, but also managing the integration. So there's sort of runtime element of that as well. So some tools worth considering. We'll have a look at some of these as we move forward. And then coming down to the physical generation level, in Designer we have forms, reports, WebPL SQL, sort of morphed into the Apex world, and the server or database elements that we can generate with tables, views, PL SQL, procedures, functions, etc., etc. On the JDeveloper side, we generate out these ADF components, business components for Java. All the database modeling can be generated out. Likewise with SQL Developer, a lot of modeling tools in there for process modeling, database modeling, SC modeling, etc. And indeed, Apex has a little bit of development tools as well. So let's have very quickly just introduce you to some of the facilities that we have within the other Oracle tools. So this is Oracle's JDeveloper 12c. And if you've not used it, J in JDeveloper obviously stands for Java, but yes, it is very much for that Java development, but you can do database development. You certainly can do modeling of enterprise systems, use case diagrams. Here we've got a class diagram, we've got an employee, department, vacation, it's the mapping. The equivalent in Designer was your ERD, but yes, a different paradigm, a different type of technology, far more modern, and it's what typically is being taught in universities, and people are coming through it from education organisations and being trained in today. So UML is still a de facto out there. And then we've got use case diagram here as well. A very, very simple use case here. Let's increase the size of that so you can see it a bit and move around. So just a bit of simple use case modelling. And these can be used to go back to your end user, your customer, and say, this is how we understand your system fits together. And certainly quite a lot of business degrees these days will do some UML modeling, so they won't be too magical or mysterious to business users. So that's a little bit about JDeveloper. Let's pop that one down. And then we've got my good friend, the data modeler side of SQL Developer. So here we've got, again, what maps to an entity diagram, showing data, person, department, vacation, and a data flow diagram. Somebody's going to buy a ticket, they're going to interact with somebody who does the ticketing, they need to pay for a ticket, so you've got data items in here as well. So very, very similar modeling capabilities as we had in Designer. Very usefully, the repository for JDeveloper and SQL Developer enable you to search for items. So much as perhaps we're using the repository object navigator to go in and find things within Designer, you can find things within the SQL Developer and JDeveloper. So here I've just searched for ticket and it's popped up a whole raft of things here. So one of the things that I think is a huge bonus for using a repository-driven development environment is when you're looking for something, you find all the occurrences of it. So if you're going to change something, you need the ability to go and find where it's used. Because 9 times out of 10, if you go and change something, you only find 90% of the occurrences of that item. And then you're sat there, when something goes wrong, wondering where on earth it was, where else it was used. So some really nice pieces of functionality there. The other thing I wanted to show you very, very quickly was, if I can find it here, here we go. There we go. Our friend Apex, this is actually 5.1 pre-release version, but there's a little bit of information that again we had in the Designer repository. So if you're just dealing with physical elements such as tables, this might be worth considering. So here we've got a table and the table items and the components of that table, triggers, package bodies that are operating on that table. So this is the dependencies. Then we've got the model and return to application. There we go. Log back in. Good old Oracle signing me out. Okay. Come on, Oracle. There we go. Well, hopefully nobody guessed my password there, but now we're signed back in. Okay, as an Oracle partner, we've got early access to this, but I'm so sure some of you may have had a look at this. So, object browser, we were looking at demo order items, and what I wanted to have a look at was the model here. And you can see that it's got a slight diagramming tool here of the, we know that a demo orders has a relationship to demo order items, as does the demo product info. So these are, the foreign keys in relationship up to the primary key here. So yeah, there's a little bit of information that we did have in Designer, perhaps of interest to some of you who are purely on the physical side. And again, it's a nice little utility here for dependencies. If you're going to change something, where is it used? So just a quick look at some of the Oracle technology that is still out there and coming on. But what about if you're not, I think these tools, apart from Apex, are very much focused on the Java environments. And those, perhaps with SQL Developer, perhaps just a little more PL SQL, but definitely not Forms. If you're still a Forms shop, and we know there are many, many of them. I talk to Forms developers and people running Forms applications on a daily basis. A lot of Oracle applications, whether it's e-business suite, the old Retech, retail, these are all Forms applications, and there's still many, many, many of them out there. And with Oracle's commitment to continue support for Forms, the 12C support timescale goes out to at least 2020, and we've had a recent patch, so the development work is going on, bug fixing is going on, and there's a few new enhancements coming along the line. No huge developments and radical changes to the product, but it is being supported, and we have many customers we speak with who are still using forms. But what about the functionality we had in Designer to support that sort of forms development? The repository itself, the repository object navigator, dependency analysis, impact analysis, code control and lifecycle management. What is available for you today? Well, that's exactly where PITS comes in, and that's what my colleagues have been working on for a good number of years, have a huge experience in this, and have extended their forms knowledge out to other Oracle technologies that people may be looking at or migrating to. I would say an upgrade is taking from an older version of forms up to the latest version of forms. A migration is taking a version of forms up to another typical Oracle technology such as ADF, Apex, a SOA environment where you're consuming web services, you're moving business logic around. So it's, again, this diagram. What do we cover? And it's a whole raft of things. And it's growing all the time as we work with customers who challenge us, and our wizards over in Germany come up with new bits of functionality which are quickly consumed by our clients. So it's a repository in the middle, and then everything going around the outside here, from development support, visual design supports, multi-language. We had the demise of Oracle's own multi-language tools. With quite a few customers looking at that. Application engineering, application analysis, migration to Apex, HTML, PL/SQL, a whole raft of things, and in particular making upgrades to the latest version of forms very fast and to cost and budget, because we can identify how much time and effort it is going to take you. So it's an engineering approach. So looking at the old Designer repository, what have we got in our tool, PITSCom? Well, we can pull things in. So we can pull, much like Designer, we have to reverse engineering. We can pull in anything from Forms 2.3 onwards. We pull in reports, menus, libraries, etc. So pull that information in and analyze that information. It's a form, it has a block, that block is based on a table or an API, etc. It goes on. We can pull in ASCII files, and again, we can do this in Designer. With SQL, we've been doing some work with some Pro COBOL recently, which I didn't think I was ever going to see Pro COBOL again in my life, but it's reared its head again. It's a core to this particular organisation's applications, so critical that they get some good application documentation and dependency and impact analysis. Obviously, we can pull in a lot of, well, all of the Oracle database objects, as you'd expect, and we can do analysis, an upgrade, modernization. Once we've got all this information, we run a lot of our own intellectual property technology on that data and push out a lot of reporting to give you things like how long will it take to develop on the back of these particular modules? How difficult is it to develop against a particular model? We can grade individual forms and say you've got so many that it will take this many days, so many that many days to push out, either as a straight upgrade or as an ADF project or whatever. So once the information is in the repository, we can do a lot with it. And as we can see, we push out forms files, ADF, Apex, reports. BI Publisher, again, with the demise of reports, BI Publisher seems to be the route a lot of customers are going to, and we have some conversion between reports and BI Publisher. Just pure ASCII files, database objects, and its schema. So very, very similar to what was offered with Designer, but bang up to date, supported, and a lot of people using the tool. The Repository Object Navigator, here was a friend, and I'm going to challenge you guys, and I think I'll send somebody a free gift if they can reply to me. Drop me an email. It's dbrown@pits.com. Perhaps with well, just give me your email. And the first person who comes back with an answer, I'll send them a gift. I'm sure we've got something in our gift cupboard here. In the repository object navigator, what happens if you hit the F12 key? Okay, what happened if you hit the F12 key? It was an interesting one. Drop me an email and we'll see what we've got. Okay, so repository object navigator, you've got all the elements and the occurrences of those elements and detail. What we've got within PitsCon, item navigation, we have a consistent left-hand side has a hierarchy navigator, and on the right-hand side we have some detail. Very, very similar to the repository object navigator, and here we've got a file with a form, which happens to be a form, and here's some details of the triggers. This particular thing is actually looking at taking the business logic, the procedural business logic in the form up to the server. So can these individual triggers, the PL SQL within them, could they sensibly be moved to the server? But this is a very typical way we look at items within the repository of PitsCon. Then we have Designer Dependency Analyzer. This was an extra tool that came along and will tell you what's within a form, how it's structured, what it's dependent on. Obviously, a form quite often is dependent on procedural libraries, object libraries, etc. So it gives you a lot more detail of usages of these things. Certainly very, very useful if you're changing things and need to check where something is used. And you can switch these around either way. So you can see that a PLL file is used by a particular set of forms. So great tools if you're maintaining systems. And I think that is probably the majority of customers these days. They're maintaining existing forms applications. You know, there are many, many of them out there. Many of them are hugely complex. And with a reducing number of people coming through with forms expertise, having tools to support your development and your change requests is becoming critical. So what do we have in PitsCon? Well, yeah, we have dependency analyzers as well, and we do a very, very similar thing. Slightly different layout. I personally think it's a little better these days, so that we can look at an individual item. Here we're looking at some database objects, so it's a view, and that view is dependent on a particular thing and the dependent objects. So at the top on the right-hand side we have things that it's dependent on, and at the bottom we have dependent objects. And we can go up and down and zoom in, go down to individual column levels, and we have a similar thing for forms, PL SQL, etc., etc. You can see that there's procedures, packages, sequences, tables, triggers, all have been loaded into the repository and parsed so that we know exactly what is going on within here. So we're finding customers are using this to improve the quality of the changes they make to their systems. And one of the interesting things we can do, and Designer didn't have this, but we can look at how the overall system fits together and what the dependencies are. We were recently working with a customer in the UK, and this diagram that we produced for them of all their forms calling other forms, we segmented into a number of clusters. It measured 6 meters by 1 meter, and we plastered it around the wall, and it became a thing of great discussion. Bits and pieces were identified as no longer required. Why on earth are they still in there? And it went on. So huge discussions. This visual view of an application can be critical. Just by looking at this screen here, we can see that the one in the middle here, the src 020.fmb, that's used by a lot of other forms here. So if we're starting to change that, it's probably going to cost more to test than if we were perhaps manipulating something on the outside, one of the forms perhaps just called by a single other form. So this is we can give a structure to your overall forms application. And then on top of that, we can look at the very detail within individual forms. So here we can see that a whole set of function keys call an individual function, tr key in, and identify what key has been pressed, and then go and call individual other procedures, screens, etc. So a huge amount of detail can be diagrammatically shown for your developers. And we're certainly finding this is hugely useful. And all this information is deduced from loading in those forms and parsing them. Right, impact analysis. The matrix diagram used to be one of my favourite tools. We could use it to support just about any methodology with user extensibility. And for those of you who used user extensibility, it was an amazing way of showing and recording information that didn't have a place to be put in the existing repository. So more simply, in this one, we're just showing individual modules and their table definitions and doing a simple crud, create, retrieve, update, delete matrix, something I'm sure most of you are very, very familiar with. It's a very, very useful tool. Now, if you've got a static manual way of doing this, 9 times out of 10 they're out of date the day they're written. These sorts of things are live, can be updated on the very, very quickly, and hold the truth. So where you get an error in an application, somebody has updated something, which modules can update a particular table? Very easily identify it, and then go and have a look at that and see where the problem lies. So we have something very, very similar within PitsCom. CRUD analysis, seeing where tables are used. We do certainly a lot more analysis on these things, so we can give a lot of extra feedback. We can see the distribution of things. We can go across PLLs, RDF files, and a lot of filtering can be applied to this. So it's not the matrix diagrammer, but we have quite an array of tools to look at your source code analysis to see where things are being done. So, if you're a fan of CRUD analysis, matrix diagrammer, there is here a tool for you to have a look at. Code control. For my sins over the years, I looked after a lot of the repository versioning and control software that was produced. And on the left-hand side here, you can see that a version history viewer of a particular module or file. It went from version 1 to version 1.1 and then split, so had a branch out to another version. Pits has a very, very similar concept where we can load all the files into the repository, FMVs, and check them out when we want to work on them, or an individual wants to work on them. If that person's working on it, it's locked by another user. It's locked so that another user can't work on it, or they can work on another version of it. And then we can do differences and compares so that we can see if two developers have been working on something, or compare two versions, a bug has just come up, or who changed what, when did they change it, what did they change. Being a very typical source code control analysis that if you're working in a big development shop, it's mandatory. You really do need one of these things. So we have one of these. Lifecycle management for Oracle Forms. So we can, in PitsCom, maintain all your database and forms and reports modules. We can help develop, search, and replace. The replacement tool is something that's used very, very successfully. If you've got 600 forms and you need to change something, such as the size of the order ID has suddenly grown by an extra 2 digits, where do we need to change that? Then we can analyze where is this order ID used, and wherever it's used, increase the text field or whatever, the number size within all the 50 forms, and we can do it in one easy go. It's something you could do with Designer, I think. It took quite a bit of working on the API, etc., and then to generate out all the forms again. Generating out 50 forms took quite a bit of time, and you had to check that all your preferences were the same again. with PITs, I've been delighted to see we can do it very, very rapidly without changing the forms whatsoever, other than the required change that you're after. We can change visual design. A lot of customers we're finding want to do a mass update of the screen size. The number of pixels on your screen is getting ever larger, and the size of your form is disappearing up in the top left-hand side of the screen and is ever getting smaller and smaller. We can fix that in probably a half an hour exercise for a couple of hundred forms, or 500 forms we did. So font sizes, overlapping checks, application analysis, multi-language support, source code control, all things that really do support that lifecycle management that we did get in Designer. Then moving forwards, and we did have a little bit of this in Designer where we were generating out web applications using HTML, field, our utils, etc. But we're doing that as well with PitsCon, being able to generate out Apex. And in the latest version, we have now have an Apex front end to our Apex tools. So even we are looking away, because all our tool is built using a forms itself. We have a forms expertise, so we have now an Apex front end. Migration to ADF and re-engineering capabilities, sucking those items into the repository from your existing application. Lots of lifecycle management. So I thought I'd go for 45 minutes, and I'm almost there for 45 minutes. Bit of a summary. Designer. It's still usable for traditional systems analysis. So if you're using it as process modeling, going back to your end users, saying this is how we think the system's going to work in the future, that's great. But there are limited generation capabilities because the transformers are taking things down to old, what I would say is very traditional database objects, traditional forms objects, and the world is moving on. People aren't generating out brand new systems in forms, and sort of if you're generating out using old, more traditional items within the Oracle database, you're not taking advantage of the huge advances that have come in versions 11 and 12 of the database. Lots of extra functionality in there that you could be taking advantage of, and the existing designer would be limiting you. Doesn't seem to be any new designer developments. There is little support for it, despite the fact that we come across customers running it time and time again, and particularly for impact analysis of their forms environment. I would suggest if you're in the Java environment, it's definitely time to move on. Look at JDeveloper, SQL Developer. If you're in the forms, reports, BI Publisher, and database side, SQL Developer and PitsCon are certainly worth considering and looking into. For those of you who've worked with anyone from Oracle in the last 6 months or 2 years even, it's all about the cloud. And one thing I've noticed, and I had a discussion with somebody from Oracle this afternoon, there's no modeling tools for what is being offered in the cloud. Whether you're using Oracle's Developer Cloud Service, it's a great tool. You can store your code up there. You can write Java applications and store them in the cloud. Source control, there's a wiki, all as part of the Developer Cloud Service, but no modeling. Then you've got things like mobile cloud services. They're consuming web services, application builder cloud services. Yes, you can have a data table at the back end, but you're actually consuming a service. Where's the modeling going? So something I'm keeping in touch with from Oracle, because these systems cannot just come out of nowhere. We do need to understand the user requirements going forward, rather than drag and drop. You can do so much prototyping with an end user, but they perhaps will only give you an hour or so. You've then got to go away, add detail to these things, document them, document the applications, make them supportable, learnable, trainable, etc. And I don't see that happening at the moment. But I'm sure somebody at Oracle is looking into this, because I think modeling is something that's dear to many people's hearts, and it's, for me, the route to successful applications. So with that, we've been going for what, 48 minutes or so. I'd like to open up for any questions. If you'd like to type in any questions here. Oracle head, there's a question here. Right, bear with me a second. Right, we also use what's called Oracle Head Start. Yes, Oracle Head Start for Designer. We extended it in various ways to improve ways to perform more. Yeah, Oracle Head Start came from our good friends over in Oracle Netherlands, Stephen Davlar and friends. It really gives extra productivity to the designer environment. I don't know whether anyone else is out there using it. A great tool, but much like Designer, it's pretty much no longer supported. I doubt whether there's anyone in Oracle who would be available to. I know Steve's still around and others, but yeah, I don't think it's a supported tool within Oracle. But yeah, a good tool in its time. There is a J Head Start as well, which I haven't used, but I know it came out of the same camp. But I also know that most of those guys are now moving on and doing work in the cloud, mobile cloud services, application builder cloud services, etc. So these guys have moved on. Any other questions there? Well, if there's no other questions, which I can't see at the moment, I will give you the rest of your afternoon, morning, or whatever back. Many thanks for joining me. A lot of this is very, very personal to me, but I'm really glad I've joined a progressive company here that's doing great stuff with repository-driven development. Great believer in what we're doing here, and we're seeing some real successful projects going out there. As I said earlier, my email address, dbrown@pits.com, so if you know what that F12 key did, without looking up in Google, I'm sure nobody would ever cheat like that, please drop me a line. If you've got any further questions, myself and Sasha Sander, both out of the UK, can certainly reply to you and answer your questions. My colleague Jason Mara is based in Pits, the USA, Pits Americas. I'm sure he'd be delighted to take an email from you. Certainly, if you've got any comments, etc., I'd be very interested to hear from you. dbrown@pits.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Many thanks for listening in. I'll send the slides and the link to the recording out to you in the next couple of days. All the best. Take care. Goodbye.